Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. Usually when we talk about a ticking clock, there's this underlying expectation of just endless ticking.
Right, like a metronome that just keeps going.
Exactly.
Right.
Like you wake up, you go to work, you sleep, the sun comes up again, and the calendar just seems to flip forward into infinity. It's a very comforting rhythm.
Oh, absolutely.
We just operate on this implicit assumption that there's always a tomorrow or, next week or next year to finally get to the things that actually matter to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the only way the modern brain knows how to function without short-circuiting. We treat time like this infinite runway. We tell ourselves we're just in the preparation phase right now, and eventually we'll clear the backlog and start actually living.
But then you stop and actually look at the math of a human lifespan, and suddenly that infinite runway shrinks into a terrifyingly small little box.
It really does. It's sobering.
The sheer brevity of it is a massive shock to the system.
Right.
So let me drop this math on you, because this is the premise that completely stopped me in my tracks today as we explore Oliver Burkeman's book, 4,000 Weeks.
It's a great book.
It is. So think about human civilization. Going all the way back to the ancient Sumerians of Mesopotamia, civilization has been around for about 310,000 weeks.
Which doesn't sound like that many weeks when you say it out loud.
Right. And then you look at Jeanne Calment. She's the French woman who is the oldest recorded person on record. She actually met Vincent van Gogh and lived to see the cloning of Dolly the sheep. She lived for about 6,400 weeks.
Wow, 6,400.
Yeah. And if you live to be 80 years old, you get just 4,000 weeks. 4,000. That's it.
What's fascinating here is that while that number sounds incredibly small and maybe even deeply depressing at first glance, understanding it is actually the ultimate shortcut to a meaningful life.
You really think so? Because it sounds panic-inducing.
Well, philosophers from Seneca in ancient Rome to Martin Heidegger in the 20th century have wrestled with this exact brevity. They saw our finitude as the defining characteristic of human existence.
Meaning the fact that we end is what makes us human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But modern time management culture tries to completely ignore this. It pretends we can just, optimize, hack, and hustle our way out of our ultimate limitation.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because to understand why we feel so completely panicked about those 4,000 weeks, we first have to understand how we got tricked into treating time as a resource we can supposedly control in the first place.
Right, like how did we even get to this point of chronic temporal anxiety?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to rewind the clock to before there were clocks. Think about a medieval peasant in early England.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Lots of mud.
Lots of mud, yeah. Their lives were undeniably brutal, servitude, crop failures, disease, but they didn't experience time anxiety. They didn't complain about a lack of work-life balance or worry about wasting the morning.
Because they just had to survive.
Well, more than that, they lived in what historians call task orientation.
Meaning the rhythms of life emerged organically from the physical world. You milk the cows when the cows need milking. You harvest the crops when the crops are ready.
Precisely. Time wasn't an abstract container that they had to figure out how to fill. They didn't view a day as a series of empty hour blocks.
So they didn't have Google calendars.
No Google calendars in the Middle Ages, right. If they needed to measure how long a chore took, they didn't use minutes, they used concrete activities. They might say a task takes a miserable while, which is the literal time it takes to sing a specific song.
Oh, wow. That's actually beautiful.
It is. Or, more bluntly, they might call it a pissing while.
Which paints quite a picture. So time was just the medium they lived in, like water to a fish. You don't try to manage the water, you just swim in it.
Exactly. Then a massive psychological shift happened. Medieval monks needed to synchronize their morning prayers while it was still dark, so they invented mechanical clocks.
Oh, so the monks started the hustle culture.
Pretty much. Suddenly, time was extracted from nature. And when the Industrial Revolution hit, that extraction went into overdrive.
Because factory workers needed to punch the clock.
Right. Time was separated from life and turned into a standalone resource to be bought, sold, and squeezed for maximum profit. We went from living in time to using it.
Like a conveyor belt.
Yes, a conveyor belt that we constantly feel pressured to keep pace with.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like we've started treating human consciousness as a faulty smartphone operating system that constantly needs life hacks to run more efficiently, instead of just a biological reality we experience.
That's a perfect way to put it.
We act like if we just download the right app or, implement the perfect morning routine we saw in a blog, we can cheat reality and fit an infinite amount of output into a finite day.
And because we view time as this relentless conveyor belt, we mistakenly believe the solution to our overwhelming busyness is just to speed up the belt.
Which never works.
Never. We think if we can just get faster, we'll finally catch up to the end of our to-do list. But this leads us directly into the efficiency trap.
Right, and we all know the basics of Parkinson's law, right? That work expands to fill the time available for its completion.
Yes, but Burkeman takes this a step further. The efficiency trap means that rendering yourself more efficient doesn't give you peace of mind. It literally generates more demands on your time.
Oh wait, really? How does that work?
Think about the mechanics of email. If you buckle down and get incredibly fast at answering emails, what actually happens? You don't get an empty inbox.
You just teach everyone around you that you are highly responsive.
Exactly. You become a bottleneck clearer for their workflows, so you just get more emails back faster. It's like climbing an infinitely tall ladder and trying to climb faster to reach the top. The ladder just keeps growing.
Which brings us to that tired old rocks in the jar productivity parable.
Oh, I hate that parable.
We've all heard it in some corporate seminar. The smug teacher shows his students that if you put the sand in a jar first, the big rocks won't fit. So you have to prioritize. Put your big rocks, your family, your core projects, in the jar first, and then the sand fits around them. Burkeman absolutely dismantles this, doesn't he?
He does. He calls it out as a rigged demonstration. The teacher only brings a few big rocks into the classroom. The whole parable relies on the assumption that there are only a handful of truly important things in your life.
Which is just not true for anybody.
Right. Modern life subjects us to what Burkeman calls existential overwhelm. The reality is, there are vastly more important, meaningful, and deeply fulfilling things you could do and genuinely want to do than will ever fit in your 4,000-week jar.
And because we can't fit it all in, we start panicking, and we turn to the trap of convenience.
The convenience trap is a big one.
We use Uber, so we don't have to wait on a corner, Apple Pay, so we don't have to dig for a wallet, food delivery apps, so we don't even have to speak to a restaurant worker. We frantically try to remove all the friction to save tiny increments of time.
But the irony of convenience culture is that removing friction often strips life of its meaning. The unsmooth textures of life, the moments of waiting and interacting, are what make it livable and memorable.
Yeah, there's that great example in the book. Burkeman highlights Sylvia Kiesma.
Yes, the scholar who abandoned academia.
Right, she left this relentless pace for a farm in Canada. Her morning routine involves physically scraping out ash and building a wood fire just to boil water for her morning tea. It takes her an hour just to get a hot drink.
To a Silicon Valley executive, that sounds like a nightmare of inefficiency. But to her, she deliberately chose that profound inconvenience because it forces her to be attentive. She has to nurture the fire. She has to have a meaningful relationship with her physical surroundings.
So the friction is the point.
Exactly. When you remove all friction, life becomes a frictionless slide straight to the grave. You don't form memories when everything is just seamless.
I hear that, but, clearing the decks still makes logical sense to me. If I spend the first 2 hours of my day getting all the small, annoying, friction-filled tasks out of the way, the administrative emails, paying the bills, running the errands, doesn't that create the pristine mental space I need to focus on what really matters?
Like writing that novel or being fully present with your kids?
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds perfectly logical, but observe what actually happens when you try it. The decks just fill up again overnight.
Because it just keeps pouring in.
Right. Because the supply of incoming demands is infinite, focusing on clearing the decks means you systematically postpone the things you care about most. You are constantly waiting for a magical moment of total calm that will never, ever arrive.
It's depressing.
Well, if you operate that way, you end up spending your entire life clearing the deck right up until the moment you die.
So if we can't fit all the big rocks into the jar, and clearing the decks is just a Sisyphean nightmare where the boulder rolls back down every morning, we are forced to do the one thing human beings absolutely hate doing.
Making hard choices.
We have to make hard choices. We have to actually face our finitude.
This is where we have to grapple with the philosopher Martin Heidegger. His writing is notoriously dense, but his core insight shifts the entire paradigm. He argued that we don't have time, we are time.
Okay, that sounds profound, but what does it actually mean to be time?
Think about it as a radical shift in identity. If you believe you have time, you view time as a separate object you possess, like a bank account.
Right, something I can budget.
Exactly. You feel you should be able to control it, save it, or spend it perfectly. But Heidegger says we are thrown into existence. We didn't choose to be born, we didn't choose our era, and we don't know when it ends. We are just here, made of finite moments.
So we are literally just a collection of moments.
Yes, and because we are limited time, any choice you make to do one thing automatically means sacrificing an infinite number of alternative paths. Deciding to marry one person or take one job means slicing away other possibilities forever.
The book highlights the story of Franz Kafka to illustrate this.
Yeah.
And it is a wildly frustrating psychological profile.
Oh, Kafka's the perfect example here.
Kafka had this incredibly fraught relationship with a woman named Felice Bauer. He stayed engaged to her, mostly communicating via letters, for 5 years.
5 years of letters.
5 years. But he kept agonizing over it, canceling their actual meetings, and he called off their engagement twice.
Kafka is the ultimate extreme symptom of someone refusing to face finitude. He wanted the idea of the relationship because ideas are clean, perfect, and infinite.
But a real relationship is messy.
Very messy. It requires compromise and actual hours of the day. He couldn't bear the real-world trade-offs because he didn't want to sacrifice the limitless freedom he felt he needed to do his writing. So he kept the relationship safely quarantined in the realm of letters, completely avoiding the compromises of reality.
He didn't want to settle, because settling feels like a little death to all your other potential lives.
And this touches on the modern fear of settling, which the political theorist Robert Gooden writes about. We're terrified of settling in our careers or our romantic relationships because committing to one specific path burns our bridges to infinite imaginary possibilities.
As long as you don't commit, you get to keep the fantasy alive that you can do anything. It's exactly like keeping 50 browser tabs open because you don't want to commit to reading just one article.
That is the perfect cognitive analogy.
You sit there feeling like you have infinite potential, you have access to all this amazing knowledge, but in reality, your mental computer just freezes and you read absolutely nothing.
Right. Refusing to settle means you spend your entire life settling for a state of limbo. You settle for endless swiping on dating apps or perpetual job hopping, always chasing the elusive perfect option. You literally cannot strive for anything meaningful without settling on a path first.
But when you do finally settle, you make a hard choice and close those other 49 browser tabs, Burkeman points out that you experience what the Swedish philosopher Martin Hägglund calls the source of all value.
Yes, the joy of missing out.
Hägglund notes that if we had an infinite summer vacation, it would be entirely meaningless. You'd just sit around forever. The vacation only matters because it ends. Missing out on the alternatives is exactly what makes the choice you do.
The joy of missing out is a powerful reframe. But if it's so powerful, why do we constantly run from it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Why, on a random Tuesday afternoon, did 3 million people spend 44 minutes watching a BuzzFeed video of a watermelon slowly exploding with rubber bands? What is the psychological mechanism driving us to do this to ourselves?
Well, we usually just blame Silicon Valley, right? We blame the algorithms for hijacking our brains.
We do, but the poet Mary Oliver calls distraction the intimate interrupter. Distraction is fundamentally an inside job. We flee to our phones or to exploding watermelons because focusing on a hard, meaningful task, like writing a book or having a difficult conversation with a partner, it forces us to confront our limited control.
Oh, wow.
When you sit down to do something that matters, you immediately face the possibility of failure, your own lack of talent, and the friction of reality. It's incredibly uncomfortable.
So the doom scrolling is really just us numbing out from the discomfort of our own limits.
Precisely. Berkman shares the story of Shenzhen Yang, a man who trained as a Buddhist monk in a Japanese monastery. Part of his training involved an excruciating ritual of pouring freezing cold melted snow over himself 3 times a day.
That sounds absolutely awful.
It does. At first, he tried to cope by distracting himself, by clenching up and trying mentally not to feel the cold, but he found that trying to ignore the reality of the pain actually made the suffering unbearable.
So how do you survive that without distracting yourself?
He discovered that when he stopped resisting and focused completely on the raw sensations of the cold, giving his full, unshielded attention to the present reality, the suffering actually evaporated.
Wait, really? It just evaporated?
Yeah, the pure agony was in his psychological resistance to the moment, not just the physical temperature of the water.
Oh, that resistance is exactly what impatience is. When we're stuck in gridlock traffic and we just start laying on the horn, we know it's not going to magically vaporize the cars in front of us. It's just a howl of rage. A refusal to accept a reality moving slower than our expectations.
The psychotherapist Stephanie Brown actually compares the speed addicts of modern culture to alcoholics.
Really, that's an intense comparison.
It is, but think about it. Just like an alcoholic drinks to outrun painful emotions, we speed up our lives to outrun the underlying anxiety of our finitude. We think if we just move faster, if we multitask harder, we'll finally feel in control of our lives.
But it only generates more anxiety, because reality won't be rushed.
Exactly. Brown argues that, like an addict, we eventually have to hit rock bottom. We have to surrender to the unpalatable truth that we cannot dictate the pace of reality.
Okay, I understand the internal psychology of that, but surely social media companies are actively using persuasive design. They employ slot machine mechanics, variable rewards, outrage algorithms. They engineer these apps specifically to hijack human psychology. Is it really fair for Burkeman to say distraction is mostly an inside job?
It's a crucial nuance. The tech companies are absolutely complicit, and the attention economy thrives on psychological manipulation. But Burkeman's point is that their algorithms are only so devastatingly effective because they exploit a pre-existing human vulnerability.
So they're just picking a lock that's already broken.
Exactly. They prey on our deep internal desire to escape the discomfort of our own finitude. They are offering us an incredibly convenient escape hatch from the anxiety of the present moment, and we are the ones eagerly jumping through it to avoid feeling constrained.
Okay, so let's say we stop trying to outrun our anxiety by speeding up. We hit rock bottom, we put down the phone, and we stop fleeing into distractions. We are left just standing here in the present moment. But how do we actually live there without turning being present into just another grueling metric to master on our self-improvement to-do list?
That is the ultimate trap of mindfulness culture. The philosopher Alan Watts described humanity as donkeys running after carrots hanging from sticks attached to our own collars. We have what Burkeman calls the when I finally mind.
The when I finally mind.
Yeah, we tell ourselves, when I finally get this project done or when I finally get through this busy season, then I can relax and enjoy my life. We treat today purely as an instrument to achieve a better tomorrow.
The book calls this the causal catastrophe in parenting, which is so poignant to me. It's when you view a child's early years purely as a training ground to optimize them into successful adults, rather than seeing their childhood as a state with its own intrinsic value happening right now.
And the tragic irony is that even when we notice this and we explicitly try to be in the moment, it completely backfires. The effort ruins the experience.
Trying too hard makes it impossible.
There was a famous Carnegie Mellon study where couples were instructed to have twice as much sex to theoretically increase their happiness, but they ended up miserable. The sheer effort of trying to optimize their pleasure and track their happiness actively destroyed the joy of the act.
Burkeman talks about his own experience watching the spectacular northern lights in Canada, and he was trying so hard to savor the moment, trying so hard to be present, that his only thought was, wow, this looks like a screensaver.
Which is so funny, but so true.
Trying too hard to be present actively alienates you from the present.
Because you are splitting your consciousness. Part of you is having the experience, and the other part is grading your performance of having the experience. The solution Burkeman points to is engaging in what philosophers call atelic activities.
Atelic, meaning no goal.
Right. These are activities that have no ultimate goal, no final outcome that exhausts them. You don't aim to complete them or monetize them. You just do them for their own sake.
Which is why hobbies feel almost subversive in today's hustle culture. The book mentions the rock star Rod Stewart. He spent 20 years building this massive, intricately detailed 1940s model railway.
20 years.
He literally booked extra hotel rooms on tour just to have space to work on his tiny trains. In a capitalist framework, spending 20 years on something that produces zero economic value and doesn't improve your resume is an act of sheer rebellion.
And engaging in an atelic activity gives you the glorious freedom to suck at something. The surfer Karen Rinaldi talks about embracing the fact that she's a terrible surfer. She took 5 years just to learn how to catch a single wave.
5 years for one wave.
Yes. But she argues that being terrible at it is a profound relief from the relentless modern pressure to constantly perform, improve, and be productive.
Embracing that requires a different kind of patience. Not the passive waiting where you grit your teeth in a doctor's office, but an active surrender to the pace of things. Like the Harvard professor, Jennifer Roberts, who forces her art history students to sit in a museum and stare at a single painting for 3 excruciating hours.
Think about the mechanics of what happens to the brain in that exercise. For the first hour, it is pure agony. The students' minds are racing, they want to check their phones, they feel like they are wasting time.
I would go crazy.
You would. But around the 80-minute mark, something shifts. Roberts calls it a second-order change. The brain finally exhausts its desire to escape and surrenders the fantasy of controlling the pace of the experience, and suddenly, the painting opens up. They start noticing microscopic details, historical context, subtle brush strokes. The true perception begins only after the rushing stops. The psychotherapist M. Scott Peck experienced the exact same phenomenon fixing a broken lawnmower. He just took the time to actually sit and look at the tangled wires without demanding an immediate fix, and the solution naturally presented itself.
So what does this actually mean for our Tuesday afternoon? If we are supposed to treat today as a stepping stone to a perfect future, and trying too hard to force ourselves to be present just makes us anxious, what do we actually do with our time?
You start by realizing that you can't try to be in the moment because you are already in it. There's no outside to life. You are made of time. The goal isn't to master your time, but to let time use you. You simply respond to the needs of your current moment, doing the laundry, writing the report, talking to a friend, without demanding that this moment deliver some massive future payoff.
To pull all these threads together, Burkeman's ultimate message is that time is not a conveyor belt you have to conquer. You don't have time, you are time. The goal isn't to frantically fit more big rocks into your jar until you collapse from exhaustion.
Absolutely.
The goal is to accept the painfully finite size of the jar, to settle joyfully into the hard choices you make, to let go of the exhausting demand to control the future, and to embrace the absolute freedom of being gloriously, wonderfully mediocre at a hobby just because you love doing it.
And if we look at this through one final lens, it completely changes how we experience our daily frustrations. The author, Sam Harris, has this concept of the last time.
The last time.
Yes. Because our 4,000 weeks are finite, there will inevitably be a final time you do absolutely everything in your life. There will be a last time you pick up your child, a last time you visit your childhood home, a last time you swim in the ocean. And you rarely know it's the last time when it's actually happened.
That's haunting.
So what if you applied that lens to the things you currently find incredibly annoying? If you knew today was the absolute last time you would ever experience the mundane annoyance of a traffic jam or the frustration of cleaning up a messy kitchen, how would that shift your relationship to the reality right in front of you?